Watch out!
In a universe of light and dark, where perception is reality. This is the line that we see at the beginning of both Bayonetta games so far. It's something that's stuck with me ever since I started playing the series. From the moral gray areas of the angels and demons, to their forms changing depending on the perception of humans. This mantra has always been deeply tied to Bayonetta's lore. And now, as the players of the series, our own perceptions are being forced to change. This is important, as I have several video analyses I'm going to make on Bayonetta 3, but this first video involving the lore of the franchise is vital to understand the others I'll be making after this one. As I've foreshadowed in my Ultimate Bayonetta 3 analysis, this video will be going over the different timelines in the Bayonetta lore. This is where our perception must change to fully comprehend everything we've seen up until now, and will see in Bayonetta 3. Strap up those guns to your boots, because we're about to dive hard into the time travel and multiverse whammy-bammy that makes up the Bayonetta franchise. First, let's start with the main timeline, as that's what we've mostly been playing through so far. In this timeline, Cereza was sealed away in a lake by Jean to survive the witch hunts, as Cereza is the only witch who could awaken a power known as the Eyes of the World, because she was the forbidden offspring of an Umbran witch and Lumen sage. While she was sealed away, all witches and sages were killed off, except for the Umbran princess, Jean, and the Lumen sage known as Balder. Cereza is then found 500 years later by Antonio Redgrave and his son, Luca Redgrave. Having no memory thanks to her deep slumber, she spends 20 years as a nun to draw in angels and kill them, as per her demonic contract. Somewhere along the way, she adopts the alias Bayonetta, and meets a man named Rodin who makes weapons for her out of demons who had bounties on their heads. Rodin is important, as we see Bayonetta wield his weapons no matter what the timeline. He's also just really cool because he's the Bayonetta world's equivalent to Satan, yet isn't Satan himself, as he refers to the devil as a separate entity in Bayo 1. Just a fun fact. Anyways, back to Cereza. Long story short, after finally meeting her father, Balder, and putting a stop to his plans by killing the god of Paradiso, Bayonetta goes on to live with Jean and kill angels as per her demonic contract yet again. She eventually also kills the god of chaos, Aesir, with the help of a boy named Loki, effectively destroying the Eyes of the World for good, since Aesir had stolen those powers from her and Balder just a bit before he died. She finds out Aesir was actually the evil that used her father's body to do the evil things he did in the past, as Aesir's spirit gets trapped inside Balder and taken back before the witch hunts. This effectively traps both Balder and Aesir in an infinite time loop, doomed to die over and over again for eternity. Bayonetta and Jean then go on to live out the rest of their lives with a never-ending case of deja vu, living in a world free of the Eyes of the World. The end. At least for that timeline. As you'd expect, there are major complications with this. As you know, this is the main timeline, but what Balder and Bayonetta end up doing in the time loop is the crucial piece that sparks the multiverse in Bayonetta lore. You see, in Bayonetta 1, Balder time travels to bring Cereza to the present as a child. This is who we will call pure Cereza, aka the only Cereza that could truly awaken the Eyes of the World. With pure Cereza in Bayonetta's timeline, the two Cerezas eventually meet because Balder sets it up that way on purpose. By meeting Bayonetta, pure Cereza witnesses a sight of complete confidence and adventure to the world that she otherwise would have never seen. Thinking Bayonetta is actually her mother, Rosa, pure Cereza is deeply inspired by Bayonetta. At the end of Bayonetta 1, when Bayonetta takes Cereza back to her proper timeline, Cereza does not follow the same path Bayonetta did during the witch hunts. Instead, she is ultra confident and refuses to be sealed away by Jean. The two of them go on to fight the witch hunts out, and presumably, during that fight, Cereza awakens the Eyes of the World. Back in Bayonetta's timeline, we see that Bayonetta and Balder also gain the powers of the Eyes of the World. This means Cereza awakening them in her timeline also awakened the eyes in Bayonetta's timeline, probably because the two had just overlapped to create each other. At this point, there are only two timelines to exist, but there are others that get created as well, and at some point, an infinite amount gets created by domino effect. So, just to make absolutely sure we're on the same page before we continue, we have two timelines so far. The main timeline, aka Bayonetta 1 and 2, and the pure Cereza timeline, which we see a glimpse of in Bayonetta 1, where Cereza refuses to get sealed away and fights with Jean to end the witch hunts. This is also the timeline we're seeing in the Bayonetta 3 gameplay trailer. I already talked about how we know this in my Ultimate Bayonetta 3 analysis, so give that a watch after this if you haven't already. After all, if you need further proof, just look at the fact that Loki never stops reminding us that Bayonetta does not look like a Cereza.
Sorry, love, but you still don't strike me as a Cereza.
Very clever, Platinum Games. Now, let's move on to the other timelines. The next alternate timeline is sparked in Bayonetta 2, when Bayonetta and Baldur once again go back in time thanks to Loki's power. At first, this would have been the same timeline as Bayonetta's, and things would have ended for Rosa and Baldur in the same exact way they did originally, as we saw in Lopter's flashback halfway through the game. This time though, Rosa teams up with Bayonetta and dies in a slightly different way. Her final words to Baldur are also slightly different. And of course, this Baldur she is talking to now is the same Baldur that already experienced this in his own timeline. He and Bayonetta then travel back to Bayonetta's present-day timeline together, leaving behind a third timeline where Cereza still finds her mother dead, but Baldur is completely absent for good and doesn't watch over Bayonetta or try to awaken the eyes. This timeline will probably be Bayonetta at her weakest, as she will most likely be sealed away and not even have Baldur guiding her to awaken the eyes when she's found at the bottom of the lake. Alright, we have the three main timelines that we need to discuss. Before that though, let's talk about how we know there are an infinite number of timelines created by domino effect. For starters, there's a fourth timeline. The Records of Time in Bayonetta 2 was revealed by Hideki Kamiya to take place in an alternate universe. This is proven by the fact that similar things happen during the sequence that we see in Bayonetta 2, but they play out very differently. We also know this can't be the same timeline as the one taking place in the Bayonetta 3 revealed teaser, because in the Records of Time, she has grown to have her Bayonetta 2 design, but the Bayo 3 teaser has her in her Bayo 1 design. Next, we technically see another version of the timeline in the opening of Bayonetta 2. Once again, it's her fight with Baldur, but it happens very differently from in-game and in the Records of Time. This was our first silent indication that the timeline split from Bayonetta 1 had actually already devolved into an infinite number very quickly. Next, we can cite the scene where Rosa and Bayonetta meet each other. I always found this odd during my playthroughs, but Rosa recognizes Cereza fully grown. I get this feeling because of the way that she addresses her.
You?
Perhaps that means another Cereza has come to her timeline before, and they had already met, possibly battled together, or talked, or both. The cherry on top of all this, and perhaps the most ominous side of the split timelines, is that at the end of the Records of Time segment in Bayonetta 2, we see a clip of Baldur dying with Aesir inside of him. He says,
"My dear, sweet child, at last you have fulfilled your promise to me."
But what was this promise? Because we've never seen Cereza make a promise to Baldur. Some people might think he's referring to the ending of Bayonetta 2, where he asks her to kill him after he goes to the past, but Bayonetta actually never acknowledges that. She never promised anything to him. So perhaps while existing in the infinite time loop, Baldur has some other experience with another Cereza. Or perhaps it was even before he got stuck in the time loop. Maybe she was even the one who gave him the idea to bring childhood Cereza to his present and split the timeline to awaken the eyes of the world? For now, we have no answers. but I'm sure we will in due time, given the third game is releasing next year. But now that that's all established, let's take a look at our main 3 timelines, as all the side timelines were created directly from the main one. The Bayonetta 3 logo splitting and creating an infinite number of moons would symbolize this. This is where Bayonetta 3's logo comes into full metaphorical impact, however. After the infinite moons fade back into the immediate 3 moons representing the main 3 timelines, it takes a particular shape. The logo is representative of the triple goddess symbol, a symbol typically related to the goddess Hecate, aka the chief goddess residing over magic and spells. Makes sense, of course, but the real importance here is how these moons on the Bayonetta 3 logo and the timelines they represent relate to the symbol. With the triple goddess symbol, the full moon in the center represents the mother. The mother embodies love, fertility, nourishment, responsibility, patience, power, and self-care. She also invites you to master giving and receiving love. This is obviously our main timeline Bayonetta, who not only was the mother to pure Cereza, but mother to all the other timelines as well. The waxing moon on the left represents the maiden, who embodies purity, youth, creation, pleasure, naivete, and new beginnings. She also invites you to explore your creativity and desires. This is obviously pure Cereza, who we saw as a child in Bayonetta 1 and are seeing as an adult in Bayonetta 3. Now, the waning moon on the right is known as the crone. The crone embodies culmination, fulfillment, wisdom, endings, and death. This is the Bayonetta we see in the Bayonetta 3 teaser trailer. She is killed against a blood moon, fighting and dying in ways that represent duality. I believe this Bayonetta is the one left behind in Bayonetta 2, when Bayonetta and Baldur go back to their present time after Rose's death. She would still awaken in the same outfit, being her Bayonetta 1 outfit, but with Baldur gone, she would never grow in power the same way other Cerezas did without his guidance to regaining her memories. These are the 3 main timelines that will be explored in Bayonetta 3. We've already had glimpses of the maiden with the newest gameplay trailer, as well as the crone with the original teaser trailer. Perhaps the next trailer will show us the mother, Bayonetta herself. Time will tell, and all this and more unlocks the true key to figuring out who the mysterious swordsman is at the end of the gameplay reveal. But that won't stop us from trying to figure out who he or she is beforehand. Matter of fact, I have a pretty good idea of who it might be. In the meantime, I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out.